The stone floor of Blackstone Keep was freezing against Elara's bare knees. Around her, the great banquet hall was a sea of velvet, silver, and candlelight. Hundreds of elite wolves from the Obsidian Court stood in perfectly disciplined silence, their heads bowed in deep respect. At the far end of the hall, standing upon the raised black marble altar, the high priest lifted a heavy ceremonial chalice. Do you, Kalen Vance, Alpha King of the Obsidian Court, take Elara of the Moonseer bloodline to be your fated Luna? The priest's words echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Down on the floor, hidden in the shadows of a massive stone pillar, the real Elara dipped a coarse rag into a bucket of icy water. She scrubbed at a stain of spilled red wine on the stone. She did not cry. Her face, smudged with hearth ash and pale from exhaustion, remained completely expressionless. I do, Kalen's voice rang out. It was a cold, commanding sound, a voice built to tear down kingdoms and enforce absolute law. Elara did not look up. She already knew what the woman standing beside him looked like, Vanya, her own twin sister. They shared the same delicate, heart-shaped face, the same silver-blonde hair, but that was where the truth ended. Vanya was draped in a breathtaking gown of white silk, the exact dress Elara had been fitted for just 2 weeks ago. Resting against Vanya's collarbone was a heavy, dark jewel, the blood moon necklace. It pulsed with a faint, unnatural red light. That necklace was the core of Vanya's dark magic. It had stolen Elara's lunar scent, sealing it away, leaving Elara smelling of nothing but ash and cheap soap. To the entire pack, the woman scrubbing the floor was simply known as No Name, a mute servant pulled from the lower villages. Elara shifted her weight, ignoring the sharp ache in her left wrist. A dark, purplish bruise wrapped entirely around her arm, a brutal reminder of the iron chains Vanya had used to lock her in the cellar while she assumed Elara's identity. The heavy oak doors at the back of the hall groaned open. The ceremony was complete. The king and his new queen were making their descent through the crowd. Elara kept her head lowered, vigorously scrubbing the floor. She just needed them to pass. But as Kalen Vance walked down the central aisle, the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted. His alpha aura was suffocating, pressing down on the chest of every wolf press. N.T. He wore a high-collared black tunic embroidered with silver, his posture impeccably straight, his piercing ice-blue eyes scanning his court. He was a terrifying, magnificent ruler. But as his polished black boots approached the pillar where Elara knelt, Kalen abruptly stopped. The entire hall held its breath. A low, dangerous rumble vibrated deep within Kalen's chest. His wolf, a massive, battle-hardened beast known for its ruthless control, was suddenly agitated. It was not a growl of anger. It was a frantic, desperate push against Kalen's ribs. For one fraction of a second, the dark magic of the blood moon necklace faltered. A faint, pure scent cut through the heavy perfumes of the banquet hall. Cedar and lily of the valley. Kalen's head snapped down. His ice-blue gaze locked onto the frail servant in the ragged grey dress. "Look at me," Kalen commanded. The voice was low, meant only for her, but it carried the absolute weight of a king. Elara slowly lifted her chin. She did not cower. She did not tremble. Her deep violet eyes, the one feature Vanya could not perfectly copy, forcing the false Luna to rely on cheap illusion spells, met the Alpha King's gaze. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Kalen stared into the eyes of the servant. He felt a violent pull in his chest, a desperate urge to reach out and pull her up from the freezing floor. He frowned, his sharp jaw clenching as his logical mind warred with his wolf's sudden madness. Why was he looking at a servant? Why did she feel like the center of the room? Kalen? Vanya's sweet, artificially soft voice shattered the moment. The false Luna stepped quickly to Kalen's side, her hand gripping his arm. As she moved, the blood moon necklace flared red. The faint scent of Lily of the Valley vanished instantly, replaced by Vanya's overwhelming, cloying perfume. The fog lifted from Kalen's mind. He blinked, the cold mask of the Alpha King returning to his face. He glanced at Vanya, then gave Elara one last unreadable look before turning away. "Clean this up and leave the hall," Kalen ordered coldly, though the slight tightness in his jaw betrayed his lingering confusion. He walked away, leading his false queen toward the throne. As Vanya passed Elara, the false Luna tilted her head. A cruel, victorious smirk pulled at her lips. She had won. She had the king, the crown, and the name. Elara looked back down at the dirty water. She slipped her bruised hand into her pocket, her fingers wrapping tightly around a broken silver hair clip, the last piece of her true mother's legacy. Vanya had stolen her name, but she could never steal her soul. The royal bedchamber was heavy with the scent of burning incense and Vanya's sickeningly sweet perfume. Vanya sat at the edge of the massive four-poster bed, draped in a sheer silk robe. The blood moon necklace rested heavily against her chest, pulsing with a faint, anxious red glow. She watched Kalen, who stood by the arched window, staring out at the snow-covered courtyards of the Obsidian Court. He had not taken off his ceremonial tunic. He had not even looked at her since the heavy oak doors closed behind them. "Kalen," Vanya murmured, forcing her voice into a soft, alluring cadence. She stood and walked toward him, her bare feet silent on the thick rugs. She reached out, resting her manicured hand on his broad shoulder. The reaction was instantaneous. Kalen's entire body went rigid. A low, vibrating snarl echoed in the quiet room, not from Kalen's lips, but from the massive, untamed beast resting within his soul. His wolf was rejecting her. Kalen stepped away, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle feathered in his cheek. He felt a sudden, inexplicable revulsion. It made no logical sense. This was Elara. This was the Luna his council had approved, the woman with the Moonseer bloodline. Yet, whenever she stepped too close, his instincts screamed that something was fundamentally wrong. It felt like standing near a poisoned well. "I have military dispatches from the northern border that require my immediate attention," Kalen said, his voice a wall of cold, impenetrable ice. "Tonight?" Vanya's voice cracked, her carefully constructed mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "It is our wedding night, Kalen." "The Obsidian Court does not halt for a wedding," he replied without turning around. "Sleep. I will be in my study." Without another word, the Alpha King walked out, leaving Vanya standing alone in the vast, empty chamber. As the door clicked shut, Vanya's face twisted into an ugly sneer of pure rage. The blood moon necklace flared, burning her skin slightly as it struggled to maintain the illusion of the lunar scent under her intense negative emotions. She needed someone to punish. Minutes later, the heavy iron door of the firewood cellar swung open with a harsh shriek. Down in the damp, freezing darkness, Elara sat huddled against a stack of rough-hewn logs. Her grey servant dress offered no protection against the biting cold, but she did not shiver. She looked up slowly as Vanya descended the stone steps, a lantern in one hand and a cruel, jagged smile on her lips. "He didn't touch me," Vanya hissed, pacing in front of Elara. "Because of you. Because somehow you are still fighting the bond." Elara remained silent, her violet eyes steady. "You think you are so strong, hiding down here in the dirt," Vanya spat. She stepped forward, her silk-slippered foot coming down hard on Elara's left wrist, right over the dark, purplish bruise left by the iron chains. Elara's breath hitched, but she bit the inside of her cheek, swallowing the scream. She would not give Vanya the satisfaction of her pain. Vanya's eyes narrowed as she noticed Elara's other hand clenched tightly in the pocket of her ragged dress. "What are you hiding?" Before Elara could react, Vanya knelt and ripped Elara's hand out of the pocket, forcing her fingers open. The broken silver hairclip lay in Elara's palm. "A broken piece of trash," Vanya mocked, recognizing their mother's old ornament. "Is this what gives you hope? Do you think this makes you a queen?" Vanya tried to snatch it, but Elara's fingers snapped shut with sudden, fierce strength. In the struggle, the sharp, broken edge of the silver clip sliced deep into Elara's palm. A warm line of blood slipped down Elara's wrist. Vanya gasped in disgust, pulling her clean hands away. "Keep your garbage, no-name. Bleed on it in the dark. Tomorrow you will scrub the grand staircase while the court bows to me." Vanya turned and swept out of the cellar, slamming the heavy iron door behind her. The lock turned with a heavy clank, leaving Elara in absolute darkness once more. Elara leaned her head back against the rough wood, her chest heaving as she finally allowed herself to take a shaking breath. She opened her hand. The silver hairclip was slick with her blood. Thick, dark drops fell from her palm, hitting the freezing stone floor of the cellar. Drip, drip. But the blood did not pool. The moment Elara's blood touched the ancient stone, it was absorbed instantly, as if the floor itself was parched. Elara froze. The air in the freezing cellar suddenly grew warm. Beneath her bruised knees, the lidstone began to hum. It was a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to travel up through her bones, syncing with the beat of her heart. Far below the cellar, beneath centuries of forgotten dirt and buried secrets, a massive stone door bearing the crest of the true Moonseer bloodline began to glow with a faint silver light. The catacombs had awakened, and they knew exactly who was bleeding above them. Morning light filtered through the towering, stained glass windows of Blackstone Keep, casting long, fractured shadows across the grand staircase. Elara knelt on the middle landing, a heavy brush in her right hand. Her left hand was tightly bound with a torn strip of grey cloth from the hem of her servant dress, hiding the deep cut she had sustained in the cellar. The dark bruise on her wrist throbbed with every movement, but she kept a steady, mechanical rhythm, scrubbing the cold marble. Footsteps echoed from the upper corridor. Vanya descended the stairs, flanked by 3 high-ranking court ladies. The false Luna wore an ivory gown woven with silver thread, the blood moon necklace resting prominently against her chest. She laughed at something one of the ladies said, the sound sharp and entirely devoid of genuine warmth. As they reached the landing, Vanya's eyes darted to Elara. A flicker of malice crossed her features. Without breaking her stride, Vanya stepped deliberately close to the bucket of murky water sitting beside Elara. With a sharp flick of her heel, she kicked it over. The freezing, dirty water washed over Elara's bare knees and soaked the bottom of her thin dress. Gasps murmured through the court ladies. Elara stopped scrubbing. She did not flinch, nor did she scramble to wipe Vanya's boots. She simply remained kneeling, her posture perfectly straight, her jaw locked. "You incompetent, clumsy fool," Vanya spat, her voice raised loudly enough to draw the attention of the royal guards stationed at the base of the stairs. "You dare soil my gown! Guards, drag this creature to the frost courtyard. Let her kneel in the snow until she learns how to respect her Luna." 2 armored guards stepped forward, their heavy boots clanking against the marble. They reached for Elara's arms. "Halt!" The single word was spoken with a quiet, icy authority, yet it hit the grand staircase like a physical blow. The temperature in the hall seemed to plummet. Caelan Vance stood at the top of the stairs, dressed in his dark mourning leathers. His piercing ice-blue eyes swept over the scene, taking in the spilled water, the aggressive stance of the guards, and the shivering servant who refused to lower her chin. The guards immediately dropped their hands and took 2 large steps back, bowing their heads in submission. Caelan descended slowly. His wolf was pacing aggressively against his ribs. It was not a reaction of anger toward the servant. It was a dark, protective instinct aimed directly at the guards who had dared to touch her. The intensity of the feeling unsettled Caelan deeply. He was the Alpha King. He did not care for nameless servants. Yet his chest ached with the need to stand between her and the rest of the court. He stopped on the landing, his tall frame casting a long shadow over Elara. "Caelan," Vanya said, immediately softening her voice into a victimized whisper. She reached for his arm. "This wretched girl ruined my morning walk. I was merely enforcing court discipline." Caelan looked down at the hand resting on his sleeve. He noticed it immediately. The blood moon necklace was pulsing with a frantic, angry red light. The magic inside it was working in overdrive, and the skin beneath the heavy jewel looked irritated, marked by a faint, raw burn. He shifted his gaze back to Elara. She was looking right at him. Her violet eyes held no fear, no pleading, and no apology. It was the calm, watchful gaze of an equal. Caelan's breath hitched slightly. He noticed the crude, blood-spotted bandage wrapped around her hand and the ugly purple bruising circling her fragile wrist. The scent of cedar and lily of the valley briefly drifted past the overwhelming smell of Vanya's perfume. A true Luna commands respect through wisdom and grace, Kaelan said, his voice cold and perfectly measured. He did not look at Vanya. Not through petty cruelty over spilled water. Vanya stiffened, her face paling in shock and humiliation. The court ladies behind her hastily averted their eyes. "Step back, all of you," Kaelan commanded. He looked down at Elara. "Get up." Elara slowly rose to her feet. The wet fabric of her dress clung to her shivering legs, but she stood tall. "Return to the cellars," Kaelan instructed, his tone softer than he intended. "Your duties here are finished for the day." Elara gave him a single, barely perceptible nod. She turned and walked down the stairs. As her bruised feet touched the lower floor, the deep, ancient hum vibrated through the soles of her shoes once more. The stone was guiding her. The catacombs were calling. Kaelan watched her walk away until she disappeared into the shadowed corridors. He then turned his head slightly toward the armored man standing quietly near the archway, his beater, Silas. "Silas," Kaelan murmured, ensuring Vanya could not hear him. "Find the servant registry. I want to know exactly which village that woman came from and who authorized her placement in this keep. Leave no stone unturned." The damp chill of the firewood cellar offered no comfort, but to Elara, the absolute solitude was a rare gift. Her grey servant dress was still heavy and wet at the hem from Vanya's cruelty on the grand staircase, but she barely felt the cold. Beneath her worn shoes, the stone floor of the cellar was vibrating with a rhythmic, low-frequency hum. It was a heartbeat. The ancient heartbeat of the Obsidian Court, calling out to the only true moonseer left within its wall. Elara moved past the towering stacks of split oak and pine, venturing deeper into the unlit corners of the cellar, where the servants never bothered to clean. The air grew thicker, smelling of deep earth and ancient dust. She stopped before a solid wall of rough, unhewn black stone. To anyone else, it was simply the foundation of the keep. But as Elara pressed her uninjured hand against the icy surface, the humming intensified, resonating deeply within her chest. She closed her eyes, letting the instincts of her bloodline take over. Her mother had whispered stories to her when they were children, tales of a hidden sanctuary beneath Blackstone Keep, sealed away when the original lunar bloodline was overthrown centuries ago. Vanya had always dismissed the stories as foolish myths, too obsessed with the shiny crowns of the present to care about the forgotten power of the past. Elara pulled the broken silver hairclip from her pocket. Holding it firmly, she used the jagged edge to scrape away the thick layer of moss and grime covering the center of the wall. Faint, intricate grooves appeared in the stone. They were not random scratch marks. They were ancient lunar runes, carved in the shape of a waning crescent. Elara traced the runes with her fingertips. She did not need a book to translate them. The meaning blossomed in her mind as naturally as breathing. Only the blood that sees the moon may open the dark. She looked down at her left hand. The crude grey bandage was stiff with dried blood, and the dark bruising from the iron chain still ached with a dull, heavy throb. Slowly, deliberately, Elara unwound the cloth. The cut in her palm was deep and angry, barely beginning to heal. She did not hesitate. Elara pressed her wounded palm directly into the center of the crescent carving. Pain flared up her arm, but she held steady, biting her lower lip. A single drop of fresh blood seeped into the porous black stone. For 3 long seconds, the cellar was dead silent. Then, a sharp crack echoed through the dark. Silver light, pure and brilliant, ignited within the grooves of the runes. The light spread like liquid fire, mapping out the shape of a massive arched door that had been perfectly camouflaged into the foundation. The heavy scent of ozone and crushed pine filled the air as ancient gears, long dormant, began to grind. Elara stepped back as the stone door slowly pivoted inward, groaning against the weight of centuries. A rush of cold, pristine air washed over her, completely different from the dampness of the cellar. Elara stepped across the threshold, leaving the identity of no name behind her in the dark. She entered a sprawling underground cavern, the Forgotten Catacombs. Tall pillars of obsidian stretched upward, lost in the shadows of the cavernous ceiling. Along the walls, silver torches flared to life on their own as she walked past, their magical flames casting a ghostly, ethereal glow over the black marble flare. Law. At the very center of the chamber, raised on a dais of pure white moonstone, was a glass-like pedestal. Elara's breath hitched. She walked slowly toward the dais, her bruised feet making no sound on the smooth marble. There, resting beneath a dome of swirling, transparent, magical energy, was the Forgotten Crown. It was a breathtaking artifact, not made of gold or jewels, but of interlocking pieces of black metal and raw, uncut moonstone. It did not look like a delicate ornament for a pretty queen. It looked like a weapon of authority. Elara reached out, her fingers trembling slightly. But as her hand hovered inches from the energy dome, the air sparked violently, stinging her skin. She pulled her hand back, her violet eyes narrowing as she studied the magical barrier. The dome was deeply connected to the foundational wards of Blackstone Keep. If she broke the seal to take the crown, it would not be a quiet theft. The magical shockwave would shatter Vanya's illusion spells entirely, and Elara's true scent would explode through every corridor of the castle. It would be a declaration of war. It would draw Kaelin, Vanya, and the entire royal guard straight to the catacombs. Elara lowered her hand, her expression hardening into absolute resolve. She was not strong enough to fight them all in the dark. Not yet. She needed the court to witness the truth. She needed Vanya's web of lies to crack in the light of day. She turned away from the crown, wrapping her bleeding hand back in the grey cloth. The crown would wait for her. It had waited centuries. It could wait a few more days. The air inside the royal corridors was growing heavy with an unspoken tension. 2 days had passed since the incident on the grand staircase. 2 days since Elara had opened the Forgotten Catacombs. Though she had left the crown untouched, the ancient magic of the keep had recognized its master. The Obsidian Court's foundational wards were slowly shifting, aligning themselves with the true Luna. And Vanya's dark magic was paying the price. Kaelin walked briskly down the dim, torchlit hallway, his heavy boots echoing against the stone. Beta Silas walked a half-step behind him, holding a stack of leather-bound registry books. "The servant records are incomplete, my king," Silas reported, his voice low. "The girl known as No Name does not exist in any of the lower village ledgers. The entry documenting her arrival at the keep was scribbled in hastily, just 3 weeks ago. There is no origin, no family name, and no official pack seal." Kaelin's jaw tightened. 3 weeks ago. Right around the time his betrothed, the supposed moonseer, had arrived at the keep to prepare for the wedding. "Find out who signed that entry," Kaelin commanded. Before Silas could reply, the heavy doors of the royal drawing room swung open. Vanya stepped out into the corridor. She wore a stunning crimson dress, but her face looked drawn, the heavy makeup failing to hide the dark circles under her eyes. As she approached Kaelin, the wolf inside his chest instantly bristled. Kaelin stopped. He narrowed his ice-blue eyes, inhaling sharply. Something was wrong. The overwhelmingly sweet perfume that usually followed Vanya was fluctuating. For a split second, it vanished entirely, leaving a hollow, scentless void. Then a brief, tantalizing wisp of cedar and lily of the valley cut through the air, before the cloying perfume slammed back into place. Vanya reached for his arm, her smile tight. "Kaelin, you have avoided my chambers for 2 nights. The court elders are beginning to whisper." Kaelin did not offer his arm. He stared down at her, his alpha aura pressing down so heavily that Silas instinctively took a step back. "Let them whisper," Kaelin said, his voice dropping into a dangerously soft register. "Tell me, Vanya, why is it that when you stand before me, my wolf feels nothing but silence?
Yes, my lord.
A fated bond is meant to be a fire in the blood, yet looking at you feels like looking at a beautifully painted wall." Panic flashed in Vanya's eyes. Her hand moved defensively to her chest, her fingers hovering over the blood moon necklace. "The stress of the wedding, the transition into the keep. It takes time for the bond to fully settle, Kaelin. You know this. I know that my instincts do not lie to me," Kaelin replied coldly. "Do not test my patience with excuses." He stepped around her, leaving the false Luna standing frozen in the corridor. Silas offered a brief, strained bow before following his king. From the shadows of an adjoining servant's alcove, Elara watched them part. She held a stack of fresh linen, her bruised wrist carefully hidden beneath the fabric. She had seen the sheer panic on her sister's face. She had smelled the brief failure of the illusion. The magic was breaking. Vanya was losing control. Elara turned and walked quietly toward the laundry quarters. She felt no rush. The stone beneath her feet hummed a steady, reassuring rhythm. He saw her pale, terrified face. He saw her hand clamped desperately over the fractured jewel on her chest. And then he smelled the sickening mixture of her heavy perfume, desperately trying to cover up the scent of fear and rotting magic. "Kaelin," Vanya whispered, her voice trembling violently. Elara seamlessly stepped back, melting into the shadows behind the royal table before the elders could notice the silent explosion that had just occurred. Kaelin set the dented silver goblet down. The golden glow in his eyes receded, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. He did not speak. He did not accuse Vanya in front of the court. He simply stared at her, the pieces of the puzzle finally snapping together in his mind with devastating clarity. Vanya felt the shift. She saw the death of her illusion in his eyes. Panic consumed her. If Kaelin spoke to that servant again, everything was over. As Kaelin turned his attention to the murmuring elders to excuse himself, Vanya caught the eye of the captain of the royal guard, a man completely loyal to her bribes. Under the cover of the feast's loud music, Vanya gave him a single, frantic nod, her eyes darting toward the corridor where Elara had disappeared. Kill her. Now. Elara did not return to the kitchens. As she slipped through the heavy velvet curtains behind the royal table, her acute hearing picked up a subtle shift in the ambient noise of the keep. The heavy, rhythmic thud of armored boots was moving parallel to her in the adjacent corridor. She glanced over her shoulder. The corridor was empty, but the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally. Marcus, the captain of the royal guard, was tracking her. Vanya had not wasted a single second. Elara knew she could not outrun a fully shifted werewolf, nor could she fight a trained royal guard with a bruised wrist and a bleeding palm. But she did not need to fight him. She just needed to lead him into her territory. Pulling her grey skirt up to keep from tripping, Elara abandoned the main servant routes and hurried toward the spiral stone staircase that plummeted into the depths of the keep. The air grew colder with every step, the distant music of the eclipse feast fading into absolute silence. Back in the great banquet hall, Kaelin Vance's sharp eyes tracked the movement near the X. He noticed the exact moment Marcus slipped out the side door, his hand resting casually on the hilt of his sword. The captain's departure, mere seconds after Elara had vanished, was not a coincidence. Kaelin's wolf let out a violent, deafening snarl inside his mind, the primal instinct to protect its mate surging to the surface, overwhelming any remaining political restraint. Vanya reached out, trying to touch his arm again. Kaelin, the elders are waiting for the oath. The feast is paused, Kaelin interrupted, his voice echoing with such a terrifying alpha command that several nearby wolves instinctively bared their throats in submission. He stood up, knocking his heavy iron chair back. He did not look at Vanya. Silas, with me. Without waiting for his beta, Kaelin strode out of the hall, following the lingering, panicked trace of cedar and lily of the valley. Down in the freezing firewood cellar, Elara rushed past the stacks of oak. She could hear Marcus's boots descending the stone steps behind her, the heavy clank of metal echoing in the dark. She reached the back wall. Her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline, but her mind was terrifyingly clear. She pressed her bleeding, poorly bandaged palm against the ancient crescent rune carved into the black stone. The stone dran her blood instantly. The ancient gears ground loudly, and the massive camouflage door swung open, spilling pure silver light into the damp cellar. Elara stepped through the threshold just as Marcus rounded the corner. The captain froze, his yellow eyes going wide as he stared at the hidden cavern. The Obsidian Court had occupied Blackstone Keep for 3 centuries, yet no one had ever known this massive, glowing catacomb existed beneath their feet. "What kind of witchcraft is this?" Marcus muttered, drawing his silver broadsword. The blade scraped loudly against its scabbard. He stepped through the stone doorway, his gaze locking onto Elara. "It doesn't matter. The Luna ordered your head, servant. I intend to deliver it." Elara did not back away. She stood in the center of the cavern, right in front of the white moonstone dais. Behind her, the forgotten crown rested beneath its swirling dome of magical energy. "The woman sitting in that hall is no Luna," Elara said, her voice echoing off the obsidian pillars. It was the first time she had spoken aloud in weeks. Her voice was not weak, it was clear, cold, and carried the undeniable resonance of the Moonseer bloodline. "And you have trespassed on sacred ground," Marcus sneered, raising his sword. "A bold lie for a dead girl." He lunged forward. Before Elara could move, a terrifying roar shook the very foundation of the catacombs. It was not the sound of a man. It was the absolute, world-ending fury of an alpha king whose mate had just been threatened. Kaelan burst through the open stone doorway, his ice-blue eyes glowing with blinding, predatory gold. The sheer force of his alpha aura hit Marcus like a physical battering ram, forcing the captain to stumble mid-lunge, his knees buckling under the oppressive weight of the king's rage. But Marcus's sword was already in motion, the silver blade slicing downward toward Elara's defenseless shoulder. Elara did not flinch. She did not scream for Kaelan to save her. Instead, she spun around, ripping the grey bandage entirely off her left hand. With a fierce, defiant cry, she slammed her bleeding open palm directly onto the magical dome protecting the Forgotten Crown. The clash of steel and ancient magic violently collided in the depths of the catacombs. Before Marcus's descending blade could even graze the fabric of Elara's ragged dress, a blur of black leather and unstoppable alpha power intercepted him. Kaelan Vance moved with a speed that defied human comprehension. He caught the heavy silver broadsword by its flat side with his bare, gauntleted hand, halting its deadly momentum instantly. With a brutal twist of his wrist, Kaelan shattered the blade. Marcus stumbled back in sheer terror, dropping the broken hilt. Before the captain could even draw a breath to beg for mercy, Kaelan's hand clamped around his throat, slamming him ruthlessly against the nearest obsidian pillar. The stone cracked under the impact. Kaelan did not unsheathe his own weapons. The suffocating weight of his alpha aura was enough to bring Marcus to his knees, utterly paralyzed by the king's wrath. But the fight behind them had already triggered something far more powerful than Kaelan's fury. When Elara's bleeding palm struck the magical dome protecting the Forgotten Crown, the barrier did not repel her. It drank her blood. A heartbeat of absolute silence followed. Then, the dome shattered. It did not break into glass. It dissolved into a massive shockwave of pure, blinding silver energy that exploded outward. The wave rolled past Kaelan, washing through the caverns, rushing up the stone spiral stairs, and tearing through the very foundations of Blackstone Keep. With the dome's destruction, the last lingering trace of Vanya's dark spell, the magic that had silenced Elara's wolf and stolen her scent was permanently obliterated. The catacombs were instantly flooded with the overwhelming, breathtaking scent of winter cedar and lily of the valley. It was so potent, so undeniably tied to the soul of the Obsidian Court, that Kaelan dropped Marcus and spun around, his chest heaving as the mate bond finally locked into place with devastating permanence. He stared at the dais. Elara stood bathed in the ethereal silver light of the altar. The ash and dirt on her face could no longer hide the striking, dignified features of the true Mu, Seer. Behind her, the ancient runes carved into the cavern walls ignited, spelling out a lineage that had been buried for centuries, confirming the identity of the woman standing before him. She wasn't a nameless servant. She wasn't a broken Omega. Elara. Kaelan whispered, the name slipping from his lips like a prayer. The realization of what had been done, what he had allowed to happen under his own roof, struck him like a physical blow. The bruised wrist, the ragged dress, the cold floors she had scrubbed while the woman wearing her face slept in his chambers. Elara did not look at him with a heart full of immediate forgiveness. Her violet eyes were calm, but they held the heavy, undeniable weight of a queen who had survived her own execution. She reached down to the pedestal and lifted the forgotten crown. It was heavy, forged from interlocking black iron and raw, unpolished moonstone. It did not sparkle with vanity. It hummed with ancient lore. As her hands gripped the cold metal, the moonstones flared with a steady, brilliant white light, recognizing the blood of its true master. The woman sitting on your throne stole my name, Kaelan, Elara said, her voice echoing with calm authority across the cavern. She chained me in the dark, silenced my wolf, and used a dark artifact to blind your instincts. But she could never steal this. Slowly, deliberately, Elara raised the crown and placed it upon her own head. The moment the dark metal touched her silver blonde hair, the catacombs seemed to exhale. The silver flames of the torches burned brighter. She was no longer a no-name. She was the true Luna of the Obsidian Court. Kaelan took a step toward her, his ice-blue eyes filled with a turbulent storm of absolute awe, profound regret, and a dark, rising fury directed entirely at Vanya. His wolf was demanding he fall to his knees, demanding he claim her, protect her, and beg for her mercy. I was blind, Kaelan said, his voice raw, stripped of all its usual icy arrogance. The bond. My wolf knew, but I let my mind be deceived. Your blindness gave her a crown, Elara replied quietly, stepping down from the dais. She walked past the trembling, defeated form of Marcus, her eyes fixed on the stone archway leading back to the surface. Now, it is time to take it back. Above them, the silver shockwave had reached the great banquet hall. The feast of lies was about to become a trial of blood. Up in the great banquet hall, confusion had begun to curdle into panic. The high elders of the Obsidian Court murmured amongst themselves, glancing at the empty iron throne left behind by Kaelan Vance. At the head table, Vanya stood with white knuckles gripping the edge of the wood. The tiny fracture in the blood moon necklace felt like a burning brand against her chest. "Silence!" Vanya yelled, her voice lacking the resonance of a true Luna, sounding instead like a desperate, shrill command. "The Alpha King is merely attending to a security matter. Prepare the litter. We will proceed with the blood oath the moment he returns." Before the high priest could respond, a deep, unnatural tremor shook the floorboards. The crystal chandeliers above rattled violently. A wave of pure silver energy pulsed up through the stone floor, sweeping across the banquet hall. It was an ancient, terrifying magic. The moment the shockwave hit the head table, Vanya screamed. The blood moon necklace flared with a blinding, toxic red light, scorching her skin. The heavy perfume she wore instantly evaporated, leaving behind the bitter, sour scent of fear and dark magic. The elders took a collective step back, their eyes wide as the illusion holding Vanya's false lunar aura together began to warp and tear. Then the heavy oak doors of the great banquet hall were thrown open. They crashed against the stone walls with a deafening boom. Beta Silas and a dozen royal guards marched in, immediately fanning out to secure the perimeter. But it was not Silas who commanded the room. Elara walked through the archway. She was still dressed in the ragged, damp grey clothes of a nameless servant. Her bare arms were bruised, her face smudged with hearth ash. Yet, resting upon her silver blonde hair was the forgotten crown. The raw moonstones embedded in the black iron blazed with a brilliant, undeniable white light. With every step she took, the suffocating scent of winter cedar and lily of the valley washed over them. Crowd. The pack fell into absolute, stunned silence. The wolves felt the pull in their blood. Their instincts, confused for weeks, finally aligned. The true Moonseer had arrived. A second later, Cailan Vance stepped into the hall behind her. His ice-blue eyes were dark with fury, his alpha aura radiating such an oppressive, terrifying authority that the entire court instinctively lowered their heads. He did not walk ahead of Elara, he walked a half-step behind her, silently declaring to every wolf in the room exactly who held the power. "Treason!" Vanya shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Elara. "Guards, kill her! She has stolen a royal artifact! She is a witch!" Not a single guard moved. "Stand down!" Cailan's voice thundered through the hall, vibrating in the chest of every wolf present. The absolute command left no room for hesitation. Elara did not stop until she reached the base of the head table. She looked up at her twin sister. Vanya's face was twisted in a mixture of rage and sheer terror, her ivory silk gown looking suddenly cheap against the glowing, ancient authority of Elara's crown. "You borrowed a name that was never yours to bear, sister," Elara said. Her voice was calm, cutting through the silence of the hall like a silver blade. "You took my clothes, my title, and you locked me in the dark. But a true Luna is not made by the sill she wears. She is recognized by the truth in her blood." Vanya clutched the necklace, sobbing hysterically. "I am the Luna! I have the mark! I have the king!" "You have nothing," Elara replied quietly. As Elara's violet eyes narrowed, the forgotten crown pulsed in tandem with her heartbeat. The sheer purity of the true mate bond resonating between Elara and Cailan was too much for the dark magic to withstand. Crack! The blood moon necklace exploded. It did not just break. It shattered into a cloud of fine red dust that rained down over Vanya's ivory gown.
Look at the lights!
The false Luna collapsed to her knees, screaming as the dark magic completely abandoned her. The fake mate mark on her shoulder instantly withered and vanished, leaving behind nothing but bare, unblemished skin. The elders gasped in collective horror. The deception was laid bare for the entire kingdom to see. Cailan stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Elara. He looked down at the woman who had shared his chambers, his face a mask of absolute disdain. By the ancient laws of the Obsidian Court, the one who wears the forgotten crown is recognized by the earth and the ancestors as the true Luna. Cailan announced, his voice carrying the full, unforgiving weight of the Alpha King. He looked around the silent hall, ensuring every elder heard his confession. I allowed my mind to be deceived by dark magic, but the stone does not lie. And my wolf does not lie. Kaelin looked back down at Vanya. Vanya, you are stripped of your stolen title. You are stripped of your rank. You will be confined to the very cellars you used to imprison the true queen. No, Kaelin, please, Vanya begged, crawling toward the edge of the dais. Kaelin did not flinch. Take her. Beta Silas stepped forward, hauling Vanya to her feet by her arms. Her hysterical screams echoed through the banquet hall as she was dragged away, the heavy oak doors closing behind her, sealing her fate in the dark. The feast of lies was over. Kaelin turned slowly to face Elara. The court was watching. The false queen was gone, but the hardest trial was just beginning. Kaelin had to face the mate he had failed. The heavy oak doors clicked shut, cutting off the last of Vanya's desperate screams. Silence descended upon the great banquet hall. It was not the disciplined, terrified silence the Obsidian Court usually held for their alpha king. It was a breathless, reverent hush, directed entirely at the woman standing at the base of the dais. Elara did not move to take the Iron Throne. She stood tall in her damp, torn grey servant dress, her bruised wrist resting at her side. The raw moonstones in the Forgotten Crown pulsed with a steady, calming white light, casting a halo of silver across her ash-smudged face. The overpowering scent of winter cedar and lily of the valley filled the cavernous room, washing away weeks of deception. Kaelin Vance stood before her. The terrifying, ruthless Alpha King of the Obsidian Court looked entirely stripped of his usual icy armor. His golden blue eyes were fixed on her, carrying the immense, crushing weight of his own failure. He had let a false Luna sleep in his chambers. He had let his true mate scrub the freezing floors. Slowly, deliberately, Kaelin unbuckled the heavy silver sword from his waist. He let the weapon clatter onto the black marble floor. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered elders. Kaelin took one step toward Elara, and then, in front of the hundreds of elite wolves who had sworn their lives to his absolute authority, the Alpha King dropped to one knee. He bowed his head, baring the back of his neck to her, the ultimate, undeniable gesture of submission from an Alpha. I was blinded by magic, but my pride allowed the deception to endure, Kaelin said, his voice rough, echoing perfectly in the quiet hall. I failed to protect you when you were entirely within my walls. I do not ask for your immediate forgiveness, Elara, but I offer you my life, my loyalty, and my throne. Do with me as the true queen sees fit. Elara looked down at the man kneeling before her. Her heart ached with the fierce, undeniable pull of the mate bond, but her mind remained as clear and cold as the catacombs she had just emerged from. She had survived too much to simply fall into his arms. Stand up, Kaelin, Elara commanded gently. Kaelin slowly rose, though his eyes remained locked on hers, waiting for her judgment. You did not recognize my face, and you did not recognize my voice, Elara said, her tone steady, devoid of cruelty but completely honest. But when it mattered most, your wolf recognized my pain. You stopped their blades on the stairs. You broke the sword that was meant for my neck in the dark. She took a step closer to him. The silver light from her crown illuminated the deep regret etched into his sharp features. I am not your queen because you claim me, Elara stated, her voice carrying out to every listening ear in the court. I am queen because the ancient stone recognized my blood, and because I survived the dark when my own sister tried to bury me. I will take my place on the throne, Kaelin, but my trust is not a crown you can simply hand to me. It is something you will have to earn. Kaelin's chest heaved as he let out a shaky breath. He did not argue. He did not demand his rights as her mate. He bowed his head slightly, accepting her terms with absolute, unwavering respect. I will spend the rest of my days proving myself worthy of the woman who wears that crown, Kaelin swore. Elara finally nodded. She turned away from him and faced the great banquet hall. She did not ask for a velvet cloak to cover her ragged dress. She did not ask for water to wash the dirt from her skin. She walked up the black marble steps exactly as she was, a survivor who had crawled out of the ashes to take back what was stolen. As Elara turned to face the Obsidian Court from the elevated dais, Kaelin took his place standing slightly behind her right shoulder, his massive frame acting as her shield. Without a single command being given, the high priest dropped to his knees. Beta Silas followed. Then, in a massive, sweeping wave of submission, every elder, every guard, and every noble in the great banquet hall knelt on the cold stone floor, bowing their heads to the true moonseer. The false Luna had stolen her name, but Elara had claimed the entire kingdom. A crown can be stolen, and a name can be erased, but a true bond cannot be buried forever in the dark. Do you think Elara was right to make the Alpha King work to rebuild her trust, instead of forgiving him immediately? If you enjoy emotional Alpha King stories about rejected mates, hidden truth, and queens rising from pain with their dignity intact, subscribe and come back for the next story.